What a Wild Spirit Brings by Lil, Chapter 40. When she awakened, it was in a bed, and she felt the heaviness of many blankets stacked upon her, their blessed warm weight pressing her down so she couldn't move and could barely breathe. There were no people in the little pink house, but the air was hot from the fire in the hearth across the room. Her body was sore everywhere it wasn't numb. She was warm. Thank the light she was warm. A woman with long brown hair came in, and seeing her awake, fed her some broth, not speaking at all. Lil tried to thank her, and found she had no voice. The woman shook her head at her and left. Lil fell asleep. It was like that over and over. The strange woman, the warmth and the broth, and not speaking. Lil would always fall asleep again. The only change at all was that she was starting to feel less pain and less numb. Otherwise, it was always the same. Finally, one day Lil woke up to something else. There was a faint sound of men laughing and joking and moaning roughly outside. Lil stumbled out of the bed and almost fell to the wooden floor. She steadied herself by holding on to wooden furniture all the way to one yellow little window. There was a wide, open green field in front of the house, and just in front of it was the woman bent over a large rock, dress torn almost completely off. There were 7 men, and each was taking turns raping the woman who had been helping Lil, who had not made a sound as they forced her. She must be a mute. Lil wanted to kill them. The woman saved her life, and now she had to do something to help her. She could hardly stand. She fell to the floor, seeking the wilder, before she even hit. She rushed outside the hut and made arrows to pierce them with, but realized that wasn't the nth way. She made a sword, but realized she wouldn't be able to swing it. Then she did the only thing she could think of, and made the whole place on fire outside. She hurried to her body and woke up. Men were screaming. The woman was ripping the door open to her house to run in. She found Lil on the floor and dragged her out. Lil had tried to start the fire, where the 4 of the men had been standing. As she was dragged, she could see one man trying to slap out the flames of his 4 companions with a wet shirt. The other 2 had fled. Yes, arrows would have been far too swift to death. She fell asleep again and saw the fire, but she simply made wind to blow it out, even if she made a metal cage to hold the men where they were. She didn't even know where the other 2 were, but she hoped she could catch them too now that the fire and smoke would be gone. Awake, she found the woman staring in shock at the cage. The charred men inside were crying and wailing. The one man who'd been trying to help them was curled in a ball with his arms over his head, praying to the light to save him. Far in the distance, the 2 men were running south for all they were worth. Lil grinned and went to sleep. She plopped another cage over where they would probably be, larger so as to be more likely to catch them. She woke up and found she had only caught 1. Sleep again. She didn't miss the last man this time. She found when she had looked out again. All 7 were caught in metal-barred cages. She laughed, a hoarse little vicious laugh. The woman was eyeing her with fear and awe at the same time. Lil rasped, but they wouldn't hurt her any more. The woman nodded, still scared, and put Lil back in bed. She pulled out a sponge and started scrubbing her skin between her legs. Lil could remember doing that, vigorously scrubbing the men away, vainly scrubbing away the mean. Lil fell asleep and filled the house with flowers for her woman. She made a bath for her, with scented soaps and cloths. She woke up and found the woman had dropped her sponge and looked completely overwhelmed. Lil smiled. The woman was upset and started crying even as she took to the bath. She was scared. Lil wanted to hold her. She wanted to explain that she knew, but she realized she didn't know. Demeen alone had raped her. This woman had had 7 rapists. Lil didn't let the woman out of the house to help the caged men, not for 3 days. The woman didn't look entirely ruffled about it either. She began to get more used to random foods and flowers and objects appearing in her house. Lil smiled each time, and the woman was beginning to not fear her anymore. Lil started getting stronger, and decided on the 3rd day to go see about the men. Leaning against her caretaker, she went out to see if any were alive. She hadn't meant to kill him in this way, but the nth way was to torture, and for once she agreed with it. The first cage held all dead men. Even the one who hadn't been burned was dead, having hung himself with the shirt. Lil frowned that he escaped his punishment. Her coldness didn't bother her for some reason. The man in the second cage was alive, but mad, muttering incoherently and rocking back and forth on the ground. Lil put a flask of water inside, and he drank every drop, eyes wide and staring at her the whole time. The final man was alive, but unconscious. Lil told the madman to stay put or she would burn him. He nodded, mumbling about burning flesh and screaming. She went to the wilder and removed the cages, then returned, and the woman alone, holding her body up while she was unconscious. Lil also made leashes for the men there, and dresses for them. She told the madman to put on his dress. He obeyed, choosing the yellow one over pink. She put the collar on him, and then bade him to help dress his companion. The man again obeyed, muttering about pretty dresses and burning flesh. Once both were dressed and collared, she led them back to the house, and let them be fed and cared for. The unconscious man came to the next day, and the madman stopped his muttering. Lil was relieved. She had been about ready to cut out his tongue. Munchin had been more than enough. They both worked. They did whatever they were commanded. They were both terrified of Lil. Once she was strong enough, and they were, she cut off their manhood. It made her vomit, once out of sight of them, but she had to. It was the nth way. The mute woman never seemed upset about any of it until then, until their screams and blood. She wanted Lil to leave, and Lil knew it. She took the leashes off, but commanded the men to remain faithful slaves to their mistress, the mute woman. They nodded and whimpered like dogs. She warned them that she would find them and burn them if they ever tried to hurt her or leave, and they groveled and promised to be good. Then Lil made the woman a lovely necklace with emeralds and sapphires, and thanked her for all of her kindness. The woman didn't want the necklace from the look on her face, but she took it. Anything to get Lil to leave. Lil walked away, for their benefit, since they probably would all go completely insane if her body just disappeared, and hoped the woman would be happy. She wondered if she would ever be able to do that to Demene, cut off her breasts and make her a dog. She didn't think so. It would be wise in the future to not use her power so much in front of other people. She knew she should go back to Yedem, but part of her still remembered Trixian, and wanting to speak to the Tri. Better to finish all her tasks and go back for good, than have to go back and just leave again. She fell asleep about a mile out, and flew in the wilder toward the desert, the land of dunes.